Cultural Difference and Identity by Meg Cloake. The presentation of this structure is split into Part 1 and Part 2. Part 1, Intro and Discussions, discussing the issue of cultural diversity and inclusive education and how this affects teaching and learning, and Part 2, discussing the implications of the issues at the macro and the local level, and then discussing how I personally as a teacher will change my teaching strategies and pedagogy to help all migrant, international and non-international students alike. Australia is one of the most culturally diverse countries on the planet, with Aborigines inhabiting the land some 40 to 70,000 years ago. British settled in 1778, and since then, through the gold rush, through the war, and even today, Australia has become a mixing pot of cultures. Over 20% of Australians are born overseas, and half the population have a parent born overseas. There are over 1/5 of Australians who speak a language other than English at home, and there are over 200 languages spoken nationwide. Unfortunately, though, our education system does not adequately cater for this cultural diversity. Australia has a history of assimilating ethnic diversity into Anglo-Australian culture. Lingering negative ideologies of assimilation rather than cultural inclusion and integration still linger and can unfortunately lead to racism in our modern-day Australia. It is imperative, therefore, that as teachers we help shape our education system, which is a powerful site of cultural transmission, to celebrate diversity and teach cross-cultural respect. Australia's education system is both a product and a perpetuator of culture. Althusser's 1994 State Apparatus essay explains that schools are a tool through which ideology is created in students. Apple 1976 similarly states that schools are a social apparatus, teaching students norms, values, and dispositions. As it is white males that head most of our institutions, especially our Catholic and capitalist educational sector, it has been the voice of white Australia that has led and bled through our curricula and social teachings throughout the years. Through cultural selection and omission, i.e. choosing what is included in the curriculum and what is not, Australia continues its ugly tradition, albeit much more subtly, of assimilating people of different races and ethnic backgrounds into Anglo-Australia. A shift towards celebrating multiculturalism and diversity through inclusive education continues to be pushed for in modern times. The relationship between social class, gender, and cultural identity can be seen in this simple diagram from Welch and colleagues 2018. It displays a multi-level approach to status, money, power, and wealth, ultimately inferring that white men are at the top of the multi-level hierarchy and that ethnic groups fall below this ruling capitalist class after women. By allowing the rates of learning a second language in secondary schools to drop by about 30% in the last 40 years, Australia's education system has implicitly decreed that languages and understanding different cultures is not of high importance. Language is the expression of culture. Language directs and expresses thoughts, beliefs, and identity. Bilingual speakers have even reported that they think differently when thinking in different languages. Lambert, 1973. If language, therefore, is the expression of culture and thought, and culture is the foundation of self-identity, it is unsurprising that migrant students often report the Australian curriculum does not reflect their ideologies, views, knowledge, and language, that the curriculum does not represent them. Emotionally, feeling unrepresented in normal culture can lead to feelings of not belonging, rejection, or being left out. According to Bond and colleagues 2007, perceptions of not belonging can be a major cause of academic disengagement, dropout, and depression amongst adolescents. This is evident in data from Australian students of Maltese, Arabic, Turkish, and Pacific Islander descent, who are on average performing lower than the Australian standard, Cruikshank 2003. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children, the first peoples of the land, are also on average performing subpar academically. How can our education system be better shaped to benefit these learners and close the academic gap? Is it our education system failing these children, or is it our society? Is it both? Certain Chinese, Southeast Asian, Greek and Jewish communities have surpassed national academic averages, and yet, despite their higher education and highly skilled nature, they are often discriminated against when it comes to securing jobs. In 2016, it was discovered that there was a widespread exploitation of international students, with 60 to 80% of migrant workers forced to work for pay half that of the minimum wage. As schools play a major role in shaping cultural and social ideologies, beliefs, and practices, it is imperative that societal change and inclusive education are optimistically renewed at a grassroots level in our Australian schools. This leads into part 2 of the presentation, the 4 focus questions. Question 1. How can we as teachers help create an education system that benefits all children? Some theorists suggest that learning a second language in high school should be mandatory, or at least the study of languages should be more readily promoted and encouraged in schools. Government funding increases could and should allow for better resources and potentially more real-life interactions, such as trips or immersions out of school to or within different cultures. Travel overseas can be difficult and expensive, but there are plenty of French, Polynesian, Filipino, Greek, and Islamic communities, for example, living right here in our suburbs and cities that students could be exposed to and experience. Languages, like other art subjects, should be given more weighting in assessment to equal that of other subjects. As Welch and colleagues 2018 and Klein 2005 state, Australia is treating languages at best as a luxury and not a necessity, at worst as a diversion from more important things, e.g. physics and maths, which are subjects more important to monolingual speakers. The promotion of languages at school could help students from different linguistic backgrounds be heard, seen, represented, and valued, helping change the Australian curriculum to be experienced not just as a product of Anglo-Australia, but as a document and policy in alignment with cross-cultural inclusiveness, could help all students benefit from learning about and learning from different cultures. Bilingualism also widely opens more gateways and opportunities for international trade and relations, helping to move Australia forwards into the future. Question 2. How can policy, pedagogy, and teaching strategies be best shaped to include international and migrant students? As well as adding more language studies to the curriculum, altering uniform policy to include traditional and cultural dress, such as the Islamic hijab, is popular policy. As well as this, the Australian government should provide funding to extra programs that facilitate learning English as a second language. As Hyde, Carpenter, and Conway 2010 explain, the one-on-one interaction which so encourages first language acquisition cannot easily be replicated in a classroom of 25. Therefore, additional English programs are needed in schools. Since the 1970s, the Australian federal and state governments have produced multiple multicultural educational policies. A core tenet of Multicultural Australia is to maintain and develop culturally and linguistically inclusive learning environments, DEXA 1996. However, sadly, it appears that when Australia has outreached its hand in past decades to better understand its Asian neighbours, they did so for commercial and industrial gains. Question 3. How can we create a culturally inclusive education system at the macro level and at the local level? At the macro level, in order for Australia to be truly culturally inclusive, anti-racism education must begin at the grassroots level, every day in everyday schools. Australian anti-racism policies emphasise the role of schools and their teachers and principals on taking racism, harassment, and bullying of ethnic minorities seriously. It is educators' responsibility to monitor practices and policies in their schools to ensure difference is accepted and respected and that all matters otherwise are dealt with promptness and fairness. Disciplinary action and compassion education helps fulfill another Australian tenet of multiculturalism, to achieve unity in diversity and to allow for the existence of shared democratic values for all Australians. DEXA 1996. At the local level, when hiring teachers, research shows that the most effective teachers in inclusive education are those without prejudice, but instead compassion and open-mindedness. According to Mills and Ballantyne 2010, schools, especially those with a focus on multicultural education, should look to hire teachers with the 3 following traits: openness, self-awareness, and a commitment to social justice. Teachers who are naturally open, aware, and fair are receptive to and open to other people's ideas, arguments, and differences. Self-awareness and self-reflection allows them to be aware and critical of their own beliefs, values, and attitudes, and how this affects their teaching and learning. A commitment to equity, equality, and social justice in the classroom can filter out from students to the playground, to the school, to the home, to the community, to the society, to the world at large. Teachers are therefore extremely important role models and can help shape a child's mind to see the richness and benefits of diversity rather than to see a paralyzing fear of the other. Question 4. How will I, as a teacher, help create an inclusive classroom that collectively and individually benefits all students? As a teacher, I plan to add everyday rituals, routines, and pedagogical practice tweaks to my teacher's toolbox to help promote and celebrate diversity in an inclusive classroom. Firstly, I will enrich my pedagogical practice with collaborative and cooperative learning activities, especially pair work. It has been shown that speakers of English as a second language often benefit, attaining more meaning from one-to-one interaction than group work. To foster belonging, integration will be important in my inclusive classroom. The more I can mix everyone around to work with each other in small groups and bond with each other with a shared goal in mind, the better. My everyday rituals and routines will include simple concepts such as singing a hello and goodbye song in all different languages every time they're in class. This will help everybody feel welcome at the start of class and help them get ready to engage and concentrate. If possible, I will display around the room artwork, flags, clothing, photographs, and text from different cultures, especially from the countries of the students I am teaching. I will integrate second languages into the classroom by asking students to answer in their native tongue and then translate their answers into English. This will be interesting when learning Shakespeare in English, for example, to notice how rhyme and meter affect the reading. Possibly analyzing meaning to see if it is lost or altered when translated into another language can help encourage curiosity within all students. As a teacher, I will take a student-centered approach to learning, whereby I will start exploring the zone of proximal development from where a student is and then build on this in reference to the individual's skills and needs. When asking questions, I will give longer time for students to answer. Be comfortable with silence and allow processing time between questions. This will help create a safe space where all students are unafraid of failing, growing, and trying again. As well as encouraging communication and interaction, I will also use clear and concise language, provide visual aids, and use body language to convey meaning. I will check for understanding before moving on, with simple, quick ways. As Hyde, Carpenter, and Conway 2010 note, language is simply not encoding in words, but also tone, pace, rhythm, and intonation. Therefore, I will have to ensure students understand what we're learning before we move on. In conclusion, to uphold a national inheritance of a land rich and free and full of diversity, we must avoid complacency in cultural education. Teachers should make inclusive education a priority and help shift the sociological perspective of different as bad to instead difference as good, helping children to see diversity as an enriching and informative delicacy of life. National and local efforts must be made to fund inclusive education programs and push for better language programs across the nation. As a pre-service teacher, you and I can all start personally planning how we will create our inclusive classrooms in the future. Thank you. These are my references, images, and that's the end. Thanks very much for listening.